Lin Bouthillier from linbouthillier.com. This is my first time making a video through a new camera, and I'm still trying to work the bugs out with a lot of help from a very good friend. But this is a little bit different scene for you than what you're used to when I make my YouTube videos. So my series is called, excuse me, it's called Monogamous at 13. Many of you are aware that just in the past few weeks I've reached 1,000 subscribers on YouTube for my channel, and I couldn't be more appreciative of every single person who's helped make that happen. It's an absolute delight for me. I couldn't be happier about it. So thank you so much. So much gratitude for all of you. So today is December 31st, 2024, which means it's New Year's Eve, of course. And this is a time where it is my experience that people who have significant trauma could really use a little extra help. The people who are my clients have for certified trauma recovery coaching sessions, they have had the experience of having their first Thanksgiving and Christmas holidays with me. And I make myself available to them for extra support during the week of Thanksgiving and during the week of Christmas, because trauma survivors have a little bit of a struggle during this time of the year. And I shouldn't say they all do, but they can. There's the potential for that to happen. And before I go any further, I just want to remind my viewers, as always, every single talk that is given by Lin Bouthillier on the matter of trauma always has the potential to trigger people. I don't intentionally trigger anyone, but it can cause a person to feel triggered. And it is an excellent idea to have something within your reach that is a grounding tool. And I have a whole bunch of them just over there, and I forgot to grab mine, so I'm going to go get it and come right back. So I have my little, it's a little holy stone from Lake Erie. I've had this for quite some time. It's a wonderful little stone, and it is really helpful for me to be able to connect my brain to my body while I'm speaking about things that can be highly triggering, or things that can be difficult memories, feelings that I'm not all that crazy about having, or just that general feeling of I just don't feel good, and I can't quite put my finger on why. I just know I don't feel right when I speak and think about these topics, or if certain feelings come to me, certain memories come to me. But today I just wanted to do just a general talk about some of you may be feeling a little bit relieved that when New Year's Eve and New Year's Day have come and gone, that means officially the holidays are over, and that some of you who can't quite feel the way you would like to feel during the holiday season can feel a sense of relief that now that's behind us, and now I can get back to feeling okay again. That's a really, really common thing. I personally have experienced that for decades. I used to say to my family that my favorite day of the year is, well, I have a couple of them. One is December 21st, because that is the day where we're going into winter solstice, and that means, or that is the day of winter solstice, and that means that we're going to start gaining daylight. For people who have significant trauma, we can be a little bit sensitive to how much daylight we are receiving, because it's just a widely scientifically known fact that human beings need vitamin D from sunlight. And when we are getting reduced sunlight during the winter months, it can really, really interfere with how we feel. And the wonderful part about that is that it is a temporary situation, but it is cyclical, which means every year we're on this cycle. Human beings have a natural cycle within, which is called the circadian rhythm, and Many of you already know about that, but because we are diurnal creatures, we have things that we do when it's daylight, and we have things that we do that our system does also when it is nighttime. And so we have a very specific rhythm of night and day that we live by, but we also have the effects of daylight and nighttime. And even some people, I mean, I've known people who swear that they have been affected by the full moon. And that's where the word lunacy comes from, where people were believed to be completely affected by the phases of the moon, with some at times unpredictable or predictable and outrageous behavior or strange behaviors occurring during the full moon. Well, human beings are really highly sensitive beings, and we all have these fluctuations. And so, getting back to my favorite day of the year, I love the day when we start to gain daylight. Even if I know that we're only gaining 1 minute per day, I feel better. I just have a lighter, a lightness in my step. I start wearing different clothing. I start feeling more inclined to have an appetite, a healthy appetite, I should say. I feel more inclined to want to be outdoors. I feel more inclination to socialize with other people. These are all the things that are very, very natural to human beings, but they are much more noticeable at times for people who are carrying significant trauma within them. And I'll just pause for a moment to just lovingly and compassionately and gently remind my viewers and my subscribers, I appreciate all of you so much, that trauma is really a very simple concept. And it can be a tiny bit confusing for some people, because some people have been led to believe, and it's not their fault. It's through our families, our socializing, our media, things that we read, things that are on television, everything all over the internet. There are some people who have gotten the concept of trauma just a little bit wrong. And what that means is they're teaching people that trauma is something bad that happens to you. In the common vernacular, yes, we could say, oh, I have a lot of trauma because this, and this happened. So I've had a lot of trauma. But literally, trauma is a response. It is our normal, healthy, natural response to an abnormal event, circumstance, situation, occurrence, or environment. So it is a response. And trauma is always felt in the body. And yes, it does affect our psychology. It does affect our emotions. But the place where it is, if you could find it somewhere, if you could pinpoint where trauma is, it's inside the body. And so my life's work is to help people understand that if it's in the body and we can feel it and we can speak about it and we can gain knowledge and understanding about it, that we can come to the understanding, and it is a beautiful, simplified, wonderful understanding for each and every one of us. And this is the truth. Certified trauma recovery coaches understand that the truth is that every single human being, in every creature, dogs, if you have a dog or a cat or a bird that's been traumatized, we have very similar trauma responses. All mammals have the same trauma response. And if you want to learn more about that, please read the work of Dr. Stephen Porges. And he is the person who created the polyvagal theory, which explains about, I'll just give you the very briefest rundown. The polyvagal theory is where Dr. Porges has studied and refined this information beautifully for us to help us understand that we have something called the 10th cranial nerve. And it comes from the base of our brain down through our face, our neck, our jaw, down into the body, and it branches off into a ventral branch and a dorsal branch. And extremely active and involved in our trauma responses. And so, where we have our parasympathetic and our sympathetic nervous autonomic nervous system, the polyvagal system of the 10th cranial nerve is responsible for how we respond to trauma and how we have that recovery period after a traumatic event, occurrence, or circumstance or environment has caused us to have a response. And so we have this automatically built-in wonderful system that helps us to be able to recognize when we've been traumatized and help us recognize that we are in recovery from our trauma. And when we help people to understand that all human beings experience traumatic events, circumstances, occurrences, and environments, and all human beings and all mammals have almost identical responses to trauma. And so if you look at canines, we get the same diseases that canines get. We get the same type of cancers. We get the same kind of liver diseases and bladder diseases, hematology issues, things that are in the blood, hormone fluctuations and things like that. We're so closely linked. There are so many similarities. And so we can see that there are all these ways that we are affected, and we can see that mirrored in our pets, that they have trauma too. And the one thing that is just as true about our beautiful dogs as it is about ourselves is that when we are carrying trauma in the body, it can be healed. One of the saddest things for me that caused me to want so badly to be a trauma mental health care professional, a certified trauma recovery coach, was to help people understand that you do not have to live with misery for the rest of your life because horrendous things were done to you or happened to you by accident or by someone's negligence or just a fluke thing that happened that couldn't be controlled. There are so many different ways that this happens, and we all know that our own experiences are unique to us, but there could also be many other people who've had similar things happen to them. Even if they had the same thing happen to them, it's still going to be a little bit different because it was their experience compared to your experience, and all the details could not have been identical. But we know that certain things that and I'm not going to name them because I don't want to intentionally trigger anyone, but if we just watch a 30-minute news broadcast, a local news broadcast, we can hear things that have happened to people that we know have happened to somebody that we know. But every single person's response is going to be different. And I began to notice, especially working in a hospital, as I did for a few years. I worked on a medical surgical floor for a year, and then I worked for the entire hospital on a float service as nursing support for a little over 1 year. And then I went to work in the emergency department, but I had been to the emergency department many, many times during my float year. So I was trained on that unit then, but when I landed there, as it might being what we call in the hospital system our home, we refer to our department, well, I finally found my home, or, this unit is my home unit. When I landed there, I knew I was in exactly the right place because I knew that the people who were coming in, most of them were having the worst day they've had in a very, very, very long time. And they come in, it might be an auto accident, and we're going to be helping. I was nursing support. Well, an ITA is called it means immediate treatment assistant. And that means that you're not just supporting nurses, you're supporting any medical staff that are there to do a procedure. So you might be supporting a registered nurse, or you might be supporting a nurse practitioner, or you might be supporting a physician assistant, you might be supporting a medical doctor, an ER doc, a surgeon who's called down to put in a chest tube or to put in a central line. Or so you would be assisting with all of these different things. But it didn't take me very long to understand that I'm in a different world down here. And a lot of the people in this department are dealing with trauma of their patients every single day. Most of the patients were experiencing some form of trauma, and a lot of them, it was years-long medical trauma. The trauma of having a chronic illness, the trauma of having a sudden illness, the trauma of having a tremendously upsetting and devastating accident, or the trauma of being abused for such a long time that the body is storing all of that trauma, because where is trauma? It's in the body. And so the emotional and psychological and relational and biological and neurobiological after effects of trauma are present inside this human being, and it could absolutely be the thing that is triggering certain illnesses to happen. We would see a lot of people being treated for autoimmune illness, chronic back pain, chronic inflammation in the joints, things like lupus, things like MS, all these different things that absolutely can be exacerbated by trauma, and some could even argue that they could be caused by significant or long-term trauma. But the entire experience for me was showing me that this is a two-sided trauma experience, because the patients are coming in and they're traumatized. The people who are bringing them in are often traumatized. The EMS staff, the emergency medical services, meaning your paramedics coming in, the Mercy Flight, which is, I don't know if that's in other states or other areas, but our helicopter service that brings in people who need to be transported much more quickly than an ambulance can go, with a full complement of highly skilled emergency technicians, medical technicians on board. They are traumatized by some of the things that they experience and that they see. And it is if you work in an emergency department, it does not take you long to figure out this place is saturated with trauma. And then I personally, myself, part of my story, and some of you know this, and some of you, this may be new for you, my career there ended as an ITA in that hospital, which I adored. I loved my job. I can describe to you what it was like for me on any given day going to work. I was excited to put my scrubs on. We had a specific color. We were color coded for the different jobs we had in the hospital. And so to be able to identify each other at a quick glance, you would know that a respiratory therapist was a respiratory therapist, because they're the only people who are wearing green scrubs. Registered nurses wore navy blue. ITAs wore maroon. Nurse assistants wore gray. All of this was just the way that it was. And oh my goodness, my little dog is having a coughing spell under my desk right now. So sorry. I have to wait just a moment. I'm going to give her just a second to settle. She's a little hound dog. She's a little beagle. In a few weeks, at the end of February, she'll be 13 years old. She's a hunting dog through and through. And she goes outside and she's snuffling around in leaves and debris and everything around the backyard. It's a fenced backyard. and she snorks up tiny particulate, and it irritates her lungs, and it takes her a few minutes to cough that stuff out. That's not unusual for hound dogs at all. But I try not to treat her with Benadryl for it unless I have to, because it can actually, over time, cause that reaction to be more intense. So it's better to just, if they can, to just let them have that minute or two to cough it out, and then they settle down. But you don't want to make their histamine response be dependent on a medication like Benadryl, unless you absolutely have to do it. But she's settling. She's doing good. Her name is Hazel. And my other little guy, he's my spaniel mix. He's over there. You can't see him right now, but that's Nemo. Nemo and Hazel are absolutely divine little dogs to live with. And they're the joy of my life. So going back to working in a hospital, it didn't take me long to figure out that a hospital emergency department is absolutely saturated with trauma, physical trauma, emotional trauma, psychological trauma, and relational trauma. And every way that a person can be in pain is what you will experience there. Every single possible way that a person could ever be in pain. And when I had my accident on my way to my shift, and it was October 31st, 2015, I was in a devastating accident on the thruway that takes me from the little town that I lived in right into the city of Buffalo, where I worked. And I got my body broken up really bad in a 70-mile-an-hour high-speed crash. And I was hit by a guy who was 22 years old, and he had no license and no permit to drive, and he had never operated a motor vehicle before in his life. And him and his buddy, who owned the car but had a suspended license, so there was no licensed driver in the car at all, but they did have insurance, thank goodness. They plowed into me, they T-boned me, hit me right in the B pillar, and nearly killed me. And I can tell you that I have gone through a full decade of recovery from that accident. And I can't say which was more difficult for me, the physical trauma or the emotional and psychological trauma. I would say they were about equal. And they took about an equal length of time for me to have recovery from. And some people argue that you can never have 100% full recovery from trauma, but we can have a night and day difference in whether or not it's still affecting us every single minute, every day, day in and day out, 365 days a year. And for some people, we have to accept that the very best that we can give them is their hand on a dial that turns, this is figuratively speaking, but their hand on a dial where they're just able to turn the volume of that trauma down to almost nothing. And the reason we say almost nothing is because with a severe trauma, such as the one that I experienced, having my sternum broken, my ribs broken, my shoulder got severely damaged, and I had to have shoulder reconstruction surgery. I had knee damage on the left knee, and I got 6 herniated discs from it, and then at years out from my initial injury was when I found out, oh great, now I have an additional herniated disc. And I also found out that I had severe spinal stenosis, but it's like here's the terminus of the of the spinal cord, and it's down here a little bit lower than the terminus of the spinal cord where my spinal stenosis, which simply means narrowing of the spinal canal. It's normally like that part of it would be about the size of my finger, my index finger, or maybe my pinky finger at this point, but it's down to 2 millimeters. And so I was given a very poor prognosis about my ability to be able to get all the way through to the very end of my life in old age and still be able to walk and have complete control of bowel and bladder. They said those three things are going away. You will not have those anymore, but we can't tell you when. And it was a spine specialist and a second opinion, a different medical community, completely different people that did not work together. I went to second opinion and they told me the exact same thing. And so the emotional and psychological trauma of having lost the job that I absolutely loved. And before I was starting to tell you, when I would leave my home to get onto that expressway, it was a 20-minute ride from my home to work, and then another, 5 to 10 minutes to get from the parking lot up to the unit where I worked, and then, put my things away, get myself signed in, and be ready to begin to start my work day. But when I was working in that really intense emergency department, something changed for me, and I knew that I needed to do something to prepare myself for the trauma experiences that I was going to have every day. And so as soon as I was in the car, I had an iPod that was plugged in, and it was playing my playlist of the music that would raise my vibrational energy and put me into a state of being able to face that environment and to go in feeling like I'm ready for whatever comes. I'm just ready. I'm what Abraham Hicks, if you're familiar with Abraham Hicks, it's Esther Hicks is the human being, and she has these wonderful communications with a group of non-physical entities which refer to themselves as Abraham. And so she has written books they have written books through her, through Esther Hicks, and that entity, the title of the books is, the name on it would be Abraham Hicks. And so what they have spoken many, many times and explained this very, very clearly is that we can raise our vibrational energy through doing certain things that feel really, really good. And then it brings us into a state, it's an emotional, psychological, spiritual state of feeling so that we can be okay with just about anything that happens. And that doesn't mean that we aren't going to cry or feel emotions. We all have that full complement of emotions, whether we work in a hospital or we're out in the world doing a completely different thing. But it doesn't mean that you're not going to feel when you bring yourself into that higher vibrational state. What it gives you, the best way I can put it into human language, into English words, would be that it gives you the feeling that you aren't doing this alone. You are assisted by, what some people would call God, the universe, spirit, whatever you want to call it, whatever is that higher power that you know is there, you know that it's with you. You don't have to understand it. You just have to kind of understand that I'm not doing this all on my own power. I am assisted here. So whatever thing comes up, it's going to give me what I need in that moment to get done what needs to get done. If I fail at this, I might have a day where as soon as I walk out of my shift, before I even get across the street to the parking ramp, I might be just sobbing my heart out. But I'm going to know that I did my best. And if that person's life couldn't be saved, or their injury couldn't be reversed, or their organ couldn't be saved, or their finger couldn't be saved, or whatever happened to them, that I could not control it, but it was still going to be somehow okay. That I can't control what somebody else's life path, whatever mission they're on here in this physical experience, it's not for me. And this was what I kept learning over and over again. It's not for me to try to control that or interfere in it. The only thing that was my job was to play a supporting role in it and to be able to give comfort and safety and reduction of pain and connection and love and understanding, listening, active listening, attunement, compassion. And the more I did this work, the more it became absolutely clear to me. I am a person who is, I thought I was an ITA. I thought I was a mother. I thought I was a wife. I thought I was a woman. I thought I was a dog mom. I thought I was a phlebotomist, because I was a certified phlebotomist, since 2010. All of these things that I thought were my identity. Yes, that's the way that I identify as a human being. But that's not what I am. It's just identity. There's a completely massive difference between what we are and our identity. Why am I way off in the weeds speaking about this? Because this is a huge, it's like a tiny, tiny grain of sand, and at the same time, it's like the hugest boulder you've ever seen. At the same time. Minuscule and massive at the same time. And I'll explain how. Because that understanding of what we believe is our identity is everything to do with how we respond to trauma and how we heal our trauma. How we understand trauma, how we understand self, how we understand others. When we can get to the point where we know not what my identity details are, my name, my age, my address, my career choices, my education, my family members, the number of trips I've been on, the music I like, what I like to do, where I work, what I do at the place where I work. All of that is details that help build an identity. But it's not who and what we are. Who and what we are is so incredibly massive. Abraham Hicks refers to it as the biggest part of you. It is the biggest part of you, the biggest thing about you that you could ever know. And that is, when I had that moment, and I can tell you, when it happened to me, I was going through some absolutely horrendous shit. Some of the worst things that could ever happen to a person. I mean, I couldn't walk. I was using a cane. I could only walk usually about 5 to 7 minutes at the most. And then the pain was so unbearable, I had to get horizontal or sitting. And I was on all kinds of pain medication. I had been told my career was over. I was told that I was not going to have control of my bowel and my bladder, and I wouldn't be walking at all. I'd be permanently in a wheelchair. And my relationship with my spouse was falling apart. And I can say sometimes all it takes is one major interruption, illness, incident, accident, anything like that. And that's what can bring you the awareness that was there the whole time, but we didn't have the ability to see it, or we didn't want to see it, or we couldn't see it. But when a relationship is toxic, our awareness of that toxicity can come through that major life event that shows us this person does not care. They just simply don't. They couldn't be bothered. And so it's a multi-level, multi-layer, multi-compartmental thing. When we have a major life event that takes us out of our career, takes us out of our activities, takes us out of our wellness, takes us out of our day-to-day function that we had had possibly for decades. So what I began to have awareness of was my identity as a partner was being stripped away. My identity as an ITA that was really hustling it every single day, or 5 days a week minimum, in an emergency department where that was my element. That's where I was just absolutely every gear engaged the entire time, leaving it all out on the floor, leaving every single day knowing I just knocked myself out, and I loved it. It was just awesome. I can't wait to do it again. I'm beat. I'm absolutely exhausted, but I just want to do it again. And it is highly addictive. It's that adrenaline rush too, and I'm sure many of you were aware of that already. Is that it can be highly addictive, and it will. If you weren't physically fit when you started, you'll get there. You know, it does a lot to change your physicality too. It also does a lot to wear away certain parts of your body and to damage and erode them, like cartilage in your knees and your discs in your spine, things like that. It can do that. Improper body mechanics, especially, will really erode certain parts of your body over a period of time. But I began to have an awareness after all of those things that occurred, all the things that felt like they were stripped away, having really impaired relationships with my, at the time, young adult children, and relationships in my family of origin were falling apart. And the more spiritual that I was becoming, the more the relationships were falling apart. The more I was having awareness that I was steeped in abuse, having more and more awareness that I was raised in an abusive household, that I had some highly abusive siblings, that I had an abusive spouse, that there were people that I thought were my friends that were absolutely not, and that I had been compensating and overcompensating and tolerating and forgiving and just overlooking things that were absolutely unacceptable for such a long time, trying to keep the peace like a lot of trauma survivors are doing. Well, I began to have this awareness. The more that was taken away from me, the more the only thing I had left was myself. Now, during this time, I had lost 2 dogs. They were absolutely precious to me. One was named Sophie. She was a cockapoo, and the other one was, she was 7, and she died from hemolytic anemia. And then I had a standard red, smooth-haired dachshund, and she was just the love of my life. She was 14 years old. She came onto the planet as a special needs dog. She's what we call MR. She had mental retardation from a hypoxia injury at birth. But she was my baby, and I absolutely adored her. And she went back to creation. And the more things that got stripped away, the more and more and more and more that I had to connect with myself. I actually got to a point where I truly believe the only thing I have left now anymore that's still intact is me. And it forced me to look at me, and I kept on going to sleep at night and waking up in the morning with the same question going in my brain. What am I? Who am I? What am I? If somebody asked me who and what I am, what would my answer be? Because the answers aren't the same anymore. Too much got stripped away. And I can't say anymore that I'm happily married, that I'm a wife. I'm not an adored wife. I'm not even a loved wife. I'm a neglected, abused, and ignored, pushed on the periphery wife. I'm a person whose children began to see me as somebody that they just couldn't connect with anymore. Both of them had told me that I'm an embarrassment to them and to the family. Why? Because I like to sing. I like to perform music. I like music that they considered to be stupid and embarrassing. They didn't want anybody to ever see me hearing, listening to, or performing the type of music which I love, which is Spanish language folk music. I absolutely love it. My favorite song that I've ever heard in my life is a Mexican bolero, and it's called Malagueña Salarosa. And I could sing that song every single day of my life and feel fantastic just from that. And I think that something that happens also is when the family that kind of we don't like to admit this. It's hard to admit, but the family who kind of wanted you to just be quiet, stop, please, and go away, not embarrass them, never say no to them, always give them what they want, go away when they don't want you around, to stop, please, please stop, and to only be exactly what they imagine you to be, nothing more, nothing less. Then you have to kind of go, well, these are some antisocial traits, or these are some nice narcissistic traits, or these are some borderline traits. And this person is not connecting with me. We connected when they were younger, but now that their personality is more formed into their adult personality, we're finding that we're not quite so compatible as I always dreamed that we would be. And so the more I lost, I keep on saying this, but it's really important. The more I lost, the more I had only, excuse me, please, only myself left, and spirit, and the universe, God, if you want to use that word. All of that was what I had, and other people who were not, the people who were not showing narcissistic traits, antisocial traits, psychopathic, sociopathic, or just utterly and completely discriminatory or selfish traits. That's all I had left. I had to keep making connection to self and to the universe and to others, but to stop trying to get my emotional and psychological relational needs met through people who couldn't give it. And when I accepted that that was my work, if I want to help people who are trauma survivors, then I'm going to go find the trauma survivors, and I'm going to put information out for the trauma survivors and help them, because they're the people who need and appreciate me. They're the people who can connect with me. They're the people who need and want and crave and desire true connection. Because what do they want? They want connection to self. What is trauma known as? The great disconnector. It disconnects from ourself. It disconnects us from others. It disconnects us from our environment. It disconnects us from our community. It disconnects us from the universe. And it can even disconnect us from source or God. And some people, universe, source, God, the all in all, it's all the same thing. I'm so sorry about the barking. I'm not on YouTube with this, and I don't have a pause button. I'm so sorry. This is one of the downsides of making a video in this way on a different platform, is I can't pause. But I think that my viewers will fast forward through this when it's posted on YouTube. And forgive me for the noise. Hold on just a moment, please. Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Please stop. Quiet now. Thank you. Thank you. Mommy heard you. Okay. That's enough. That's enough. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All done. She's the only one that does not understand when it's time to fermer la bouche, when it's time to be done making some noise. She just absolutely can't stop herself. Hey, 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 thank you. That's enough now. Thank you. Thank you. Quiet now. Thank you, Hazel. So, if we're not our identity, and we're not all of the things that we find in our community to label ourselves with, if we're not all of those things, then what are we? Hush. Hush. Shush. Thank you. not all of those things, then what are we? What is the answer to that? What on earth could be the answer to that? And I can tell you, I was asking it and I didn't have to ask very long. Relatively short time period is what happened. But I got out of bed one morning and it was sometime around, I would have to say around 2018. Got out of bed in the morning and I had been injured for 3 years and I was still in a grueling recovery, just horrendous pain at that time. And I got out of bed and as soon as my feet touched the floor in the morning, it was like it was said out loud to me inside my head. And it was so clear. I don't know where it came from. I can only imagine, but the words came to me. You are love, light, truth, compassion, and human decency. And it was like being downloaded. It was like being given a massive gift. It was what I call a knowing. And being told, and I honestly don't know. I did a lot of research about this. There are some people, the school of thought, that can only come from your supraconscious, or what we call higher self. Some people call it the subconscious. Some people call it, your connection to source. But it was something inside of myself. It didn't come from outside. It was inside, and it told me, you are love, light, truth, compassion, and human decency. And I was so shocked by it that I just said it out loud. I was just standing between my bed and the wall, and I just stood there saying, love, light, truth, compassion, and human decency. I am love, light, truth, compassion, and human decency. And it just rolled off my tongue like it was the most natural thing in the world to say. And at that moment, it was as if every single worry that I've ever had in my life immediately ceased. It was just all taken away. And it didn't stay that way the whole day. I would say it lasted a few minutes before any worrisome, troubling thought entered my head. But it never left me. And, tonight at midnight it's going to be 2025. And to go from 2018 to 2025, 7 years, knowing who and what I am, has changed everything. And that's when I started to learn about trauma. That's when I started to learn about, and I had been studying everything from Abraham from around 2008. So I'd had about a decade at that point of understanding about the metaphysical, a lot of paranormal, and I think that word has really deteriorated in its meaning because of the meanings that people have assigned to it. But paranormal really just simply means human experiences that we cannot fully explain. We can't fully understand them. We can't fully explain them. And a lot of people in our lives do not want to hear about our paranormal experiences because they find them very disturbing and off-putting, and they're afraid of it. But I'm a person who's had multiple paranormal experiences in my life, and right around that time, I had some significant ones, and I'll share them in another video, hopefully at the beginning of January. But I've been away for a while because I got really sick with influenza B just days before Thanksgiving, and I was sick for 3 weeks from that. And then after that, I still don't know what caused it, but I had a major allergic reaction to something that required a lot of medical attention, and it was absolutely miserable to go through the physical experience of having a severe body-wide allergic reaction. But I was so uncomfortable and so medicated that I couldn't make my videos for a few weeks After I recovered from the flu, then that happened. And I'm still coming out of it, but I'm doing so much better. And I'm super, super excited about sharing what I know with you for another year. I'm super excited that brand new year starts tomorrow, starts at midnight tonight. And for every single one of you who doesn't really fully understand your trauma, or someone that you love that has trauma that's significant and it's impacting their life and yours, if you don't understand all of it, that's okay. Every single person's on their own timeline. Every single one of them is on their personal journey. Their order of understanding, their time of understanding, their process of understanding is different for each and every one of you. And all I can say about that is when you're supposed to know certain things, you will. That is part of our humanness. When we're supposed to know something, we will be given that information. Just like the day that I got out of bed, I don't even know what day it was, but it was in 2018, and I got out of bed and immediately, love, light, you are love, light, truth, compassion, and human decency. And I have never in my life experienced words that I knew I could not argue with. I knew that there was absolutely zero that I could argue against that. It was absolute purest truth I had ever heard in my life. And I don't say that to flatter myself, because what I understood was this is a huge part of this, and this is really, really important to understand. About 4% of the world, of all the human beings on the planet, out of almost 8 billion people, 4% of them, slightly over 4%, I believe. Another way to put it is 1 in 25 people is not love, light, truth, compassion, and human decency. I would love to believe that every single one was. But I refer to the people who are not love, light, truth, compassion, and human decency as the hurters. They hurt people. They hurt other human beings. Or if they see another human being injured, hurt, abused, misused, maligned, marginalized, mocked, shamed, put on the periphery, mistreated, abused, they don't care. They just don't have that thing, that piece of humanity inside them that helps them or allows them to care. They can't. So that is a massive part of understanding your trauma, is that there are hurters in the world, and that there is a very specific known percentage of them. I don't have the book here right next to me. I'm about halfway through with it. I still haven't done my video about my new book haul, a whole bunch of new books that I've added to my library. But the first one that I read was Psychopath Free by Jackson Mackenzie. I can't recommend that book to you enough, and he's got amazing resources in the back of it for any of you who have dealt with a person who is a relationship sabotaging, tremendously hurtful person, and also known as highly narcissistic or sociopathic or psychopathic. They're not the same things. They're a little bit different, but they all have similar traits, and the after effects are the same. They injure people, and they don't mind. So we know that there are 4% of the people on the planet, slightly more than 4%, that do these things to other people, and they cause trauma in other human beings, even in animals as well. The other book, I'm halfway through of it now, it's by Martha Stout, PhD, and it's called The Sociopath Next Door. And it is an incredibly good collection of information. It's not just facts, but it really gives you examples of what a person in your life who has the ability to cause that level of grief and pain and trauma in another human being intentionally without caring. They just absolutely don't care. It will help you to understand that there is a lie that we've all been told starting in childhood. Even Walt Disney um, made a movie called Pinocchio. And in my generation, every kid had seen the movie Pinocchio at least once. Sometimes it was on Sunday nights, part one and part two, The Wonderful World of Disney. It would be shown like, uh, an hour of it, and then the rest of it the next week, next Sunday. Um, Usually aired, I think, at 7 or 8 p.m., at least in the Eastern time zone. I think it was on at 8 p.m. But anyways, my children had the VHS tape movie Pinocchio given by their grandparents, but that's the movie where children were told about their conscience. Everybody has a conscience. Everybody has one. Every single human being has a conscience, and it'll trouble you if you've done wrong. What a lovely thought that is. And it's completely false, because the actual root problem for every single person who has high antisocial traits, high narcissistic traits, some, not all, but some people with high borderline traits, um, all of these people can have either highly impaired conscience, and in the worst cases, such as with sociopaths and psychopaths, people with high antisocial traits, they have no conscience. And so we're taught by our parents, we're taught by our schools, we're taught by religious authorities, by media, movies, all kinds of things throughout our lives, especially starting in our early childhood. We're taught that everybody has a conscience. It is not true. And it is a huge misunderstanding, because when we get to a certain age and we're dealing with a person that we might be in a romantic relationship with, we might have had a child with them, we might be cohabitating with them as our roommate, we might be supervised by them at our job. They could be our parent, they could be our grandparent, they could be our school bus driver, they could be just any person whatsoever in our community or in our government, or just somebody that we know exists. They don't have conscience, and we can't accept that they don't have conscience, because we got programmed in our earliest childhood and all through our adolescence and everything to understand that everybody has a conscience. And so we take the idea of conscience being present or not present right off the table before we're even an adult. That argument is settled inside of us. We cannot accept that somebody doesn't have a conscience, because we'd have to believe what everybody told us, right? I went to Catholic school, and we were all taught that every single human being has conscience, and that some people can ignore their conscience, but everybody has conscience. And then I went to catechism, which means I was no longer in Catholic school, but my parents drove me to catechism classes, were what was called CCD, religious education. It went by a bunch of different names. But again, still being taught, everybody has a conscience. That is one of the most misleading things that we've taught society, because children need to know how to be able to differentiate between a person who is absolutely devoid of conscience and a person who shows signs of having a healthy conscience, a working, intact conscience, a gauge inside which tells them whether or not they're causing pain or harm or torture or abuse or just intentional unhappiness towards another human being. We all make somebody else unhappy, from time to time. We all do that. That's not lack of conscience, because after we do it, we kind of feel like shit. A person with an intact conscience, it'll be nagging at them. You'll just be driving or taking a walk and going, oh man, that happened 11 years ago and I still wish I had never done that. That's a conscience. That's a conscience that's alive and well. And do I think we should be tortured by conscience? No. No, but I think we need to know whether or not we are a person who has a conscience. And if we have a conscience, then I think that is what love, light, truth, compassion, and human decency actually um, is resulted from. So the conscience is there, which produces a person who is a person of love, light, truth, compassion, and human decency. Another way to say it is they are connected to source. They have a God connection. They're connected to the universe. They're connected to a higher power. They're connected to the all in all. They're people who understand that a tree isn't just a greenish brownish fog that you walk through. There's some force in our universe that holds it together so you can differentiate a tree from a house, from a car, from a child, from a bicycle, from a bird, from a lake, from a puddle. There's something that makes everything take form and keep form. I think I'm going to leave it there because they just will not let this be a peaceful recording. So, thank you for tuning in. If you want to work with me as your... Hush, please. Hush, please. Thank you. She actually gave me a dirty look for saying hush. Okay, she always has to get the last word too. If you want to work with me as your certified trauma recovery coach for your recovery, I would love to be your partner in recovery. And you could have a discovery call with me. You can call my phone. It's 716-994-3052. You can find my website. It's going to be under construction for a while. This is going to be my third website. I haven't had super great outcomes with my website, but I have somebody who's helping me now, and they are phenomenal at their work. And so, hey, 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 stop, please. Thank you. So, hush. The website will be up and working soon. I really appreciate you sitting with me and staying through this really, really barky video. You didn't have to do it, but I appreciate that you did it. If you want to work with a certified trauma recovery coach to help you understand how wonderfully, beautifully, successfully you can heal from your trauma, I'd love to work with you on that. And it's a beautiful process. And there's nothing in the world that brings me more joy than seeing another person go from being in a state of pain to living the life they truly want to live because of their new understandings and their new connection to self, to others, to the environment, to the world, to the universe. And it feels like getting everything back, and you can't put a price on it. So, if you haven't already, I would love it if you would like and subscribe and share and put comments in the comment section and hit the notification bell and tell your friends about certified trauma recovery coaching and about a lady in upstate New York who loves to make videos to help people understand how to recover and help us understand a little bit more about ourselves and other people, so that we can live our best life. We don't have to live a life of suffering. And it seems almost impossible when we're in it, when we're right in the middle of it. We don't see any way out. But I promise you, it does exist. And I'm a person who was told I was not going to be walking anymore. And I walk. I have to be careful what I do. I have to stay within certain boundaries. And remember that I do have some fragility in my spine, but I can live the life that I want to live. And I don't live every single day in fear of the worst thing that could happen. I just live. And part of living, for me, is being a resource to help other people to be able to do it too, in the best way that they know how. So, thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. Thanks for sticking with me through all the barking. And I hope you have the very, very best that the new year has to offer. I hope you have a fantastic 2025. And if you've had not so great of a 2024, like many of us, wasn't such a great year in some ways, there's better things coming. It might feel good to let go of this one and to embrace the new one. And if 2024 was excellent for you and the best things that you could ever imagine happen, I couldn't be happier for you. That's phenomenal. You deserved every single bit of it. And not one of us deserves to have the worst things be happening or anything unpleasant or harmful happening. None of us deserve it. We deserve to be in a state of feeling good. We deserve to be in a state of being okay, better than okay. But sometimes okay is all we can get. And that's okay. We're just moving through it. Everything has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And when the worst of times are here, that can be a really comforting thought. Every single thing that I ever experience has a beginning, a middle, and an end. So if things are bad right now, sometimes the only way through it is through it, but you will get through it. And you're still going to be you, and you're still going to be able to heal. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you next time. Take care.